Welcome to the CACFP annual training for center-based sponsors. This training is presented by the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs, also known as ODE-CMP. This training is part of CACFP annual training requirements that must be completed by the Food Program Coordinator listed in CNP Web by August 1st, 2025. To complete CACFP annual training, the Food Program Coordinator must take this training, complete the quiz associated with this training, and also the Civil Rights and Racial and Ethnic Data Collection trainings and the quiz associated with those trainings. Food Program Coordinators who completed the Civil Rights and Racial and Ethnic Data trainings and quiz for the Summer Food Service Program, also known as SFSP, do not need to take that quiz again. While other sponsor staff are not required to take this training or quiz, sponsors are encouraged to share this training with other staff who have CACFP responsibilities. In this training, we will go over CACFP resources that are available, a few changes for the upcoming fiscal year, including a new process and some new CACFP meal pattern changes, and then we will spend the majority of our time on CACFP reminders, including reminders for annual tasks and procedures. By the time you are done with this training today, we hope you will understand upcoming changes to CACFP operations and the state agency annual overview of financial management. These are the upcoming changes for 2026. And we hope that you will know where to find resources for CACFP operational requirements. In this training, there are some changes and reminders that will only apply to specific sponsor types. Look for the yellow tag shown on the slide for more information. This will also be called out in the verbal dialogue for the slide. First, let's go over some resources that are available. The ODE-CMP CACFP webpage is the main repository of information for Oregon CACFP sponsors. This page includes links to many resources, including the CACFP Policy and Procedure Manual. You can see the image of the manual on the screen here. The manual is the main resource for sponsors regarding CACFP requirements and is updated twice a year. The main CACFP page also includes links to the CACFP meal pattern and menu planning page, with dozens of resources related to the meal pattern. And it also includes links to the CACFP training page with links to a variety of CACFP trainings that are posted on YouTube. ODE-CMP will have updated trainings available on this page by fall 2025. Sponsors are encouraged to keep up with all CACFP updates through the CACFP memo page. Memos and newsletters are sent directly to the inbox of the listed Food Program Coordinator, but if you missed one, they will also be linked and archived in this memo page. And finally, it's always a good idea to go back to the source document. This is 7 CFR 226, which is the federal regulation that covers the Child and Adult Care Food Program. These resources will cover the basics of CACFP operations for Oregon sponsors. Next, let's cover some changes coming up in fiscal year 2026, which will start on October 1st, 2025. It includes a new process called the bank statement verification and some newish CACFP meal pattern changes to be aware of going into 2026. The bank statement verification process was previously called the one-month review of financial records, and this was discussed briefly in the CACFP annual training last year. This is a new requirement for multi-site, non-school food authority sponsors only, as a result of the Program Integrity Rule updates from 2023. ODE-CMP has spent a lot of time over this past year developing this new procedure, and we will be rolling it out to required sponsors in fiscal year 2026. The bank statement verification process will be required annually for all multi-site, non-school food authority sponsors who will not receive a CACFP administrative review that fiscal year. For the bank statement verification, sponsors will be notified via email at some point during the fiscal year, and at that point, we will request bank statements from a specific month along with the supporting fiscal documentation for that month. We are still finalizing this process and will provide additional training in early fall 2025 prior to implementation. Next, we have our newish CACFP meal pattern changes. These changes are from the April 2024 final rule changes, and all of them have already been implemented or been allowed to be implemented as of July 1st, 2024. There are two changes that are in early implementation right now, but must be implemented by October 1st, 2025. These changes include updates to nuts and seeds, substituting vegetables for grains, changes to added sugars, this is for our breakfast cereals and yogurts only, and meal modifications with registered dietitian signatures. All of these changes are already in our current CACFP policy and procedure manual, our CACFP meal pattern chart when it's applicable, and will be in our updated CACFP meal pattern trainings that will be available by end of early fall 2025. First up is nuts and seeds. This change needed to be implemented by July 1st, 2024, and you can find information in the CACFP Memo 07-2024. This update now allows nuts and seeds to credit for the full meat and meat alternate component and removes the 50% crediting limit for nuts and seeds at breakfast, lunch, and supper. Next, we have substituting vegetables for grains. This was also implemented as of July 1st, 2024, and additional details can be found in the CACFP Memo 03-2025. This change allows providers who serve primarily American Indian or Alaska Native participants to substitute vegetables to meet the grains requirements. Half a cup of vegetables or 1 cup of leafy greens will substitute for 1 ounce equivalent of grains. This has been updated in our CACFP Policy and Procedure Manual, and a new training on serving traditional foods will be available this summer. Next, we have our first update that must be implemented as of October 1st, 2025, although early implementation is also allowed. The information for this change can be found in CACFP Memo 07-2024 as well, and other memos on grains and infants have been updated to reflect these changes. This change updates the sugar limit requirement from a total sugar limit to an added sugar limit. Now breakfast cereals must contain no more than 6 grams of added sugars per dry ounce instead of total sugars per dry ounce. Yogurts similarly must now contain no more than 12 grams of added sugars per 6 ounces. Previously, yogurts could not contain more than 23 grams of total sugars per 6 ounces. Both the total and added sugar limit requirements are valid until September 30th, 2025. Starting October 1st, 2025, only the added sugar limit requirements will be valid. This does not change the crediting for breakfast cereals very much, since most breakfast cereals only include added sugars. However, we have seen that some yogurts, which meet the total sugar limit requirements, do not meet the new added sugar limit requirement. It is a good idea to check the yogurts you are currently serving and start to identify the yogurts and remove from rotation those that do not credit starting October 1st, 2025. New sugar limit wallet cards are available from our CACFP meal pattern and menu planning page, and the page is linked in the description section below. Finally, we have our meal modification change, which must be implemented starting October 1st, 2025. Again, early implementation is allowed right now. This change requires the acceptance of registered dietitian signatures for medical statements. As a reminder, medical statements may be signed by healthcare professionals who have prescriptive authority in Oregon. This does not include registered dietitians in many states, including Oregon, So this change now allows medical statements signed by registered dietitians to be accepted here as well. You can refer to CACFP Memo 07/2025 for guidance from USDA, and ODE has also released our own guidance, which includes information specific to Oregon. Both memos are listed in this slide and available from the ODE CMP CACFP memo page. Sponsors can choose to accept medical statements from registered dietitians and registered dietitian nutritionists now if they choose to. Sponsors who have registered dietitians on staff are encouraged to review the ODE memo for additional guidance on when it is appropriate for RDs and RDNs to sign medical statements in Oregon. All of these meal pattern changes are not new per se, but since the official implementation date is now coming up for some of them, it's a good idea to make sure you are familiar with them again prior to October 1st, 2025. It's time for our first knowledge check. The bank statement verification is required for, is it A, all CACFP sponsors, B, all multi-site CACFP sponsors, C, all multi-site non-school food authority CACFP sponsors, or D, all school food authority CACFP sponsors? And the answer is C, all multi-site non-school food authority CACFP sponsors. School districts already provide financial information to ODE through other fiscal audits, and USDA has clarified that this requirement only applies to multi-site sponsors. Let's try another knowledge check. Starting October 1st, 2025, the sugar limit requirements for breakfast cereal and yogurt will be based on added sugars, not total sugars. Is this true or false? And the answer is true. Starting October 1st, 2025, the sugar limit requirements will be based on added sugars. Now let's move on to CACFP reminders, which will cover the rest of this training. This section includes annual tasks and procedures that must be followed for your CACFP operations. There are no new requirements in this section. Instead, these are reminders of current CACFP requirements that we wanted to remind sponsors of due to common findings and questions that we received over the past year. Let's go over the annual tasks first. There are a lot of CACFP tasks that must get done over the course of a year, but there are a few we wanted to make sure are on your radar. This includes CACFP renewals, staff training, site monitoring, racial and ethnic data collections, WIC flyers, building for the future flyers, and the free language assistance and accommodation statement. You might be a pro with CACFP renewals already, but as a reminder, it is a requirement for all sponsors, and this year applications will open August 1st, 2025, and close August 15th, 2025. The authorized representative and food program coordinator will receive a memo before the start date with all requirements that must be completed. The requirements will include CACFP annual training. This includes this training and civil rights and racial and ethnic data collection trainings, the online forms that have to be completed through CNP Web, the CACFP annual budget that must be submitted for all non-school food authority sponsors, and some additional offline forms that will be needed to support your application, such as area eligibility documentation for at-risk after-school sites, vendor contracts, and pricing policy statements. Sponsors are encouraged to block some time on their calendar to prepare for renewals. And of course, it is always a good time to make sure you are up to date with your staff trainings. This year, the food program coordinators have been assigned CACFP annual training, including this training you are taking right now. Every year, make sure to check the CACFP training memo to see who is responsible for ODE CMP trainings, since it may vary from year to year depending on the trainings required. For staff who are not required to take ODE CMP provided trainings, make sure that your organization is providing them with annual trainings on civil rights and any other CACFP trainings related to their duties. If there are any new hires in between annual trainings, make sure they are trained and up to speed on CACFP before they start taking on their CACFP duties. Make sure that all trainings are documented with an agenda, date, the name of the trainer, and the name and signature of the attendees. It is important for multi-site sponsors to train a site monitor annually. This ensures that site monitors know how to complete site monitoring accurately and within all requirements. Site monitors must not be a staff member at the site they are monitoring, and they must be an employee of the sponsor. These two requirements help to select for a monitor who is responsible to your organization, but also may have a broader perspective than someone who is in the middle of CACFP duties at the site every day. All site monitoring trainings must be documented with the same information as your other staff trainings, with training agenda, date, name of trainer or training taken, name and signature of attendees, or a signed verification statement stating training taken and date completed. ODE CNP will have a new site monitoring training available in summer of 2025. Site monitoring is required for all multi-site sponsors. New sites on the CACFP must be reviewed within the first 4 weeks of CACFP operations. After that, all sites must be reviewed at least 3 times per year, with no more than 6 operational months in between reviews. You don't want to go too long between reviews since problems can build, and this can result in a site not being in compliance with CACFP for a long time. 2 of your 3 sites must be unannounced. This means that the site staff must not know that you are coming that day, and your review schedule must be varied and unpredictable. Of course, make sure at least one of the unannounced reviews include a meal observation. Varied and unpredictable schedules are a requirement in the regulations. So as you create your monitoring schedules, make sure that in addition to meeting the 3 reviews per year, you are also ensuring that reviews are not always on the same day of the week, that they are not always for the same meals, and that you are not always reviewing the same sites on the same months each year and even the same weeks. For example, you don't want site staff to say, "I always see you the 3rd week of April, so I figured you would be here this week." While it might make your staff feel good that they can anticipate when you arrive, you want to make sure that you are getting an unvarnished version of their daily operations. ODE released our Site Monitoring Flexibility Memo back in October 30th, 2023, which detailed out situations where sponsors can review a site less than 3 times a year. If a sponsor is operating a site less than 9 months a year, the sponsor can conduct less than 3 site monitoring reviews a year at that site. Sites that operate 0 to 4 months out of the year must be reviewed at least once. Sites that operate 5 to 8 months of the year must be reviewed twice. And sites that operate 9 to 12 months of the year must be reviewed the regular 3 times. The requirement to have at least one unannounced review with a meal observation is still there. So sponsors with sites operating up to 8 months must make sure that their reviews include an unannounced review and a meal observation. If there are major findings or serious deficiencies, additional follow-up reviews are still required. One common issue we see with site monitoring is that the 5-day reconciliation section is not completed, or it is being completed inaccurately. The 5-day reconciliation compares the meal counts against the attendance records and enrollment for 5 consecutive operating days in either the current or prior claim month. If attendance is taken using in and out times, this must be compared to reported meal service times to determine if participants were in attendance during approved meal times. If there are meal counts greater than attendance for the times that the participants are in care, these are considered overclaims and must be disallowed. Monitors must follow up by retraining staff. We know that the 5-day reconciliation takes some time, and we encourage monitors to complete these sections prior to on-site reviews if the enrollment, meal counts, and attendance are available prior to the review. Once a monitoring review is done, it is important to check that the review tool is complete. Sponsors are required to use the ODE CMP Site Monitoring Report form unless prior approval is given to use the sponsor's own form. Sections that are not applicable must have NA written in with a short explanation. Anytime there is a finding, monitors must document the finding and write in the follow-up actions that have been taken. Findings need to be discussed with the site supervisor and affected site staff before the review is complete. Both the monitor and site supervisor must sign and date the form. As a best practice, sponsors should assign someone to review monitoring forms to ensure they are complete. Again, new site monitoring trainings will be available summer 2025. Racial and ethnic data must also be collected annually for each site that you operate. You must use the ODE CMP Racial and Ethnic Data form since it includes all the necessary information in the categories specified by USDA. Sponsors can collect participant information from enrollment documentation, confidential income statements, or through parent and guardian surveys. Visual identification must not be used to determine racial and ethnic affiliation by sponsor staff. This can be sensitive data, so make sure that all information is kept securely and only available to those who need to work on the data. More information on this is available in the training video titled Racial and Ethnic Data Collection and via the CACFP Memo 11/2021. WIC flyers are a requirement for all sites except adult daycares and at-risk after-school sites. Information about WIC must be posted where it is visible to parents and guardians of enrolled children. Sponsors must add the local contact information of the closest WIC office. Sponsors who are looking for flyers can go to the Oregon WIC Outreach Materials webpage, which is managed by the Oregon Health Authority. Colorful sample flyers are shown on this slide, and many additional flyer designs are available for download or for ordering. The Building for the Future flyer is also required to be posted for all sponsors and site types except for adult daycares. The flyers must be located so that it is visible to the public. It provides information about CACFP and its benefits. Posters can be downloaded from the USDA Building for the Future webpage. And remember to add in your contact information into the template before you print it out. Finally, the last annual task we are going over in this training is the Free Language Assistance and Accommodation Statement. This is a statement that notifies your families and the general public that free language and other accommodations are available from your organization. This is part of civil rights requirements from DR 4300-03, and ODE CMP has sent out a memo related to this back in September 2023. And we provide annual reminders through our newsletters and during renewals. Sponsors are required to provide notification at least once a year. This can be done by posting it on a website so that it is available year-round, or sponsors can choose to send it out via newsletters, social media posts, or other methods of communication. Make sure that any notifications that are sent out are saved or can be easily pulled for viewing when requested. It's time for more knowledge checks. All site monitors must be trained on their duties each year, and the trainings must be documented. Is this true or false? And the answer is true. Site monitors must be trained on their duties each year and document their trainings. Racial and ethnic data collections for CACFP must be completed annually. Is this true or false? True. Remember that data must be collected for each site and reported on ODE CMP's CACFP Racial and Ethnic Data form. One more. The free language assistance and accommodation statement must notify the public of the availability of assistance from ODE. Is this true or false? The answer is false. The statement must notify the public of the availability of assistance from your organization, not from ODE. Now that we have gone over annual tasks, let's take a look at some critical CACFP procedures that are required for all sponsors. This includes point of service meal counts, CACFP menus, submitting claims, and financial management. Point of service meal counts is a vital procedure, and ODE-CMP strongly encourages that all sponsors have a written procedure. ODE-CMP has created a procedure template that is available to be downloaded from the CACFP webpage linked in the description section below. Written procedures are important as a training tool and help sponsors ensure that all staff are taking meal counts the same way. Meal counts are a keystone to accurate meal reimbursements and must be taken and recorded at the point of service. When we say point of service, we mean that it occurs when the participant has received a complete reimbursable meal during the approved meal time. Meal counts cannot be taken after the participant leaves the line or table, and any meals that are not documented during the point of service timeframe must not be claimed for reimbursement. Depending on the meal service style, a fully reimbursable meal may be served differently, which can impact when a point of service meal count should be taken. Sites can serve cafeteria style, restaurant style, family style, or even a combination of restaurant and family style. Cafeteria style is when meal components are picked up by participants in a line. Restaurant style is when all meal components are portioned and served on individual plates and cups for each participant. Family style is when participants are seated at a table and all required components are placed on the table at the same time in communal bowls and pitchers for participants to serve themselves. In a combination restaurant and family style, some components are served in full individual portions to the participant and others are served communally with family style. This is used when participants are unable to serve all meal components themselves. Where we see the most issues for point-of-service meal counts is with family-style meal service. In family-style meal service, staff must understand that family style requires participants to be seated before the point-of-service meal counts are taken. If children are not seated at the table, they must not be counted for the meal. In addition, family style requires the participants to serve themselves from the communal bowls, pitchers, and platters. Teachers and aides can help the participant, but when they do, they must be serving the participant the full portion size. And one of the biggest issues is that all required meal components must be placed on the table at the same time with sufficient minimum portion sizes for all participants. An updated family-style meal service training will be available summer of 2025. Having a CACFP menu procedure is critical as well, so sponsors can make sure that meals served meets meal pattern requirements. A written procedure is also strongly encouraged for all sponsors, and ODE-CMP has created two different CACFP menu procedure templates. CACFP menu procedures must cover the CACFP requirements for meal pattern and maintaining menu records. It must go over tasks that are completed to meet CACFP requirements, including documenting the working menu and saving and checking supporting documentation. CACFP menus have certain information that must be listed to show that meals meet meal pattern. It includes listing the dates of service, the site name or location if there are more than one site on CACFP, the meals and snacks that were served, the actual food items that were served, any substitutions to the menu, milk type for each age group served, labeling of whole grain-rich items, names for breakfast cereals, flavors for yogurts, and a USDA short non-discrimination statement. All of these requirements are listed in the ODE CMP handout documenting your CACFP menu. Sponsor staff who are responsible for menus are encouraged to review this handout and incorporate the use of this handout in their written procedures. In addition to the menu, there are certain food items that will require additional supporting documentation in order to show that the meal pattern was met. For the grains component, this includes whole grain-rich foods and breakfast cereals. For the meat and meat alternate components, this will include yogurt and tofu. For combination foods, these are foods that include more than one meal component or are food items with both creditable and non-creditable ingredients. You will need additional supporting documentation for both homemade and processed combination foods. Individual meal accommodations are also foods that require additional supporting documentation. This includes medical and non-medical requests, although the documentation requirements may be different. The supporting documentation that will be required for each of these food items are listed in this table and in the Documenting Your CACFP handout referenced earlier. Whole grain-rich foods will require one of several different documentation, but the most common one is the ingredient list, which is readily available. Other available documentation can include WIC lists, product formulation statements, also known as PFSs, child nutrition labels, also known as CN labels, and standardized recipes. You do not need every single document on this list, only one for each whole grain-rich item served. Breakfast cereals, yogurts, and tofu will all require a nutrition fact label to show that they meet their sugar limit requirement for cereal and yogurt, and to show that they meet protein requirements for tofu. Homemade combination foods will need a standardized recipe, while processed combination foods will need one of the following: a CN label, PFS, standard of identity, or food buying guide crediting. Medical accommodations will require a medical statement for the participant if the accommodation will mean that the meal does not meet meal pattern. And nutritionally equivalent milk substitutes will need a meal preference form for the participant, a product packaging showing the items served, and if the product is not on the ODE CMP approved list for nutritionally equivalent milk substitutes, then a nutrition facts label or PFS will be required to show that the milk substitute does meet nutritional standards. Updated trainings will be available this summer. After the end of every month, CACFP sponsors are tasked with submitting their monthly claim. This is an important task to get right, which is why having a written procedure for submitting claims is required for all sponsors. ODE CMP has 2 procedure templates available for submitting claims. All claim procedures must include a review of the following records for each site: daily attendance records to show that there are enough participants on site for the meal counts claimed, an accurate daily point of service meal count for all meals and snacks served, working menus or production records showing what was served each day along with menu supporting documentation, making sure that there is an approved site information sheet in CMP Web for the site you are claiming, having CACFP enrollment documentation on file for all participants if this is required for your site type, and a 1-month enrollment roster if it is required for your site type as well. These documentation, as relevant for your site type, must be on file and reviewed for accuracy to make sure you are not claiming meals for situations where meals were not counted appropriately, did not meet meal pattern, or for sites that are not approved, or for participants that are not enrolled in CACFP. Having this listed out in your CACFP submitting claims procedure is important since it is one step in showing ODE that you are making sure your claims are accurate. The last procedure we are going over is financial management. A written CACFP financial management procedure is required for all CACFP sponsors as part of CACFP performance standards, and not having a written procedure will result in findings for all sponsors. ODE-CMP also has 2 procedure templates available for this. A financial management procedure must cover how the organization manages the CACFP nonprofit food service account and include the following information. How is fiscal integrity of all CACFP funds maintained? What is the process to ensure accountability of all expenses? How is the organization ensuring program funds are only used for authorized CACFP purposes? What are the safeguards in place to prevent improper financial activities? How do you ensure CACFP administrative costs do not exceed the regulatory limits? Answering these questions helps CACFP sponsors explain how they ensure that all CACFP reimbursements are used for CACFP purposes as a form of fund accounting. Sponsors are encouraged to use one of the ODE-CMP financial management procedure templates since it helps to define the requirements and guide sponsors in creating a procedure that meets nonprofit food service requirements. Now it's time for our last 2 knowledge checks. Which of the following is not a valid supporting documentation to show meal component crediting for processed combination foods? Is it A, child nutrition labels, B, product formulation statements, C, standards of identities, or D, ingredient lists? And the answer is D, ingredient lists. While ingredient lists are valid supporting documentation to show that an item meets whole grain rich requirements, it does not show the amount of each ingredient that can credit for each meal component that is required for processed combination foods. The other 3 supporting documents listed, CN labels, product formulation statements, and standards of identities, all can be used to show meal component crediting for processed combination foods. One last question. A written CACFP financial management procedure is required for, is it A, all sponsors, B, only school food authority sponsors, C, only multi-site sponsors, or D, only multi-site school food authority sponsors? And the answer is A. All sponsors are required to have a written CACFP financial management procedure. This is part of the performance standards for CACFP. To wrap up, in this training, we reviewed the CACFP resources that are available to you from the ODE-CMP website, the changes that you can expect for fiscal year 2026, including a new bank statement verification process and some new CACFP meal pattern changes, and some CACFP reminders related to annual tasks that must be completed, along with the procedures that must be followed. If you have questions, reach out to your assigned child nutrition specialist. ODE supports equity and excellence for every learner. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. Thank you for taking this training.